Hi, everyone. Welcome to the BC Girls Podcast. We are your hosts, Matoba,
Hanfil, and
Akane.
Then the big question, how do you forgive? What steps do you need to take? Or what are some things that you guys recommend people take to forgive? For me, I did just share, my story with my dad, and because that was the most recent moment of forgiveness. Of course, there are other moments in my life, but I think the first step is to calm down, and get into a place where you can be level-headed, where you can think rationally, and not get over emotional. So try to calm yourself, especially if you're angry, or you feel like hurting that person who hurt you. Definitely take a step back and calm down. Then secondly, see the situation from the other person's perspective. So this is where sympathy and empathy come into play. Like I've said before, hurt people. So, try to understand or come to a point where you can see, okay, what pain or what are they going through that caused them to react that way to me. And I think on a more national level, I think of all of the, recently with the Atlanta spa shooting, and with police brutality in general, and with the shooting in Boulder, I think it's Boulder, Colorado. The shooters, the people who committed the crime, the murderers, they are obviously coming from a place where, they're not in their right mind. A person who has lived a good life or has generally just accepted the things in their life that they've gone through and moved on from it, it's kind of hard for them to go back and get in that mindset to hurt others. I think about, the ordinary everyday person, and I think about myself and the life that I live. I have no reason to hurt anyone. The other person's perspective. I mean, the shooter in Boulder, Colorado, reports are saying that he really mentally wasn't sane. He was suffering from mental issues, and he was very paranoid. So when we understand, the other person's perspective, then we can rationalize our emotions a bit more. And then the third step, I would say, for me personally, I do my best to connect to God. God for me, or the divine, the creator, is the origin of peace. And I think about how the creator has devoted his and her heart and soul for many years, since the beginning of time, for the sake of finding his and her lost children. And so if anything, I'd say the creator is the best being in existence who can understand the pain that you're going through, and is probably suffering even more pain to this day. So any kind of pain you experience, physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, whatever you're going through, for me, God is the person who can relate to that pain the most. And so I think of, the creator as my heavenly parent. Anytime I have a problem, I run to my parents, I run to my heavenly parent. Children, babies, whenever they want milk, or they cry out for their mother, they cry out for their father, right? So anytime I experience pain, or even when I'm, experience joy as well, I go to my father and mother and tell them hey, this happened. So that's what I do. I turn to God whenever something like this has happened. And, I know that God hasn't given up and still fights every day to find, restore his children. So through true love, obviously. And then the fourth step I do my very best not to hold on to resentment. There are many studies done about how negative emotions can really affect your physical body. And holding on to that is not good for your mind, your heart, your body, and your soul. So I do my best to just let it go, because if I don't, then I become a cynical person who ends up being somebody who can hurt others. And, the cycle just continues to repeat. So, and not only that, you suffer more when you hold on to those feelings of resentment and negative emotions.
I was just reminded earlier this week I had a one-on-one checkup with like my coordinator for youth group, so he was asking me like how do I view God, and like what is my relationship with God. And in a sense, forgiveness was kind of embedded in there. So when you're talking about how you go to God, especially, it kind of brought me back to that conversation, because I said I especially pray to God or ask God for more clarity, as well as just a way that kind of goes beyond my own capacity or my own perspective, because I think God has more of a bigger heart than we have to see another person in a different perspective than our own limitations allow us. So I feel like a lot of times when I'm going through a lot of struggles or frustration, especially with like forgiving someone or struggling how to even forgive myself, I feel like I always mostly go to God and like kind of desperately pray. I'm like, what should I do now? I'm kind of at my limits here. So I feel like that's definitely one thing. As well, I feel like your determination. I feel like if you have a weak determination when it comes to figuring out how you really want to forgive yourself or another person, I feel like it's going to be harder for you to follow through with like the steps in order to get to that stage, compared to if you're more determined or you're really trying to progress as much as you can, even though it's difficult, because this kind of thing is not an easy process for everyone. It's different, like it's step by step. And when you can come to terms with even your own like flaws, because us as human beings, we're not perfect. Some of us would want to be perfect, but it's ideal, but we have flaws. And I think being okay with that, and especially where you're at any time and place, I think is especially important, because I think that's something we also can struggle with, being okay where we're at, whether it's in a good place or a bad place, and then starting from there so we can get to a point where we'll be able to forgive. I think that's a good thing to establish and to clarify with yourself, because if you're not willing to be okay or even acknowledge where you're at, it's kind of hard to take more substantial steps, because you're more like trying to ignore the situation or ignore the problem that's going on at hand. So yeah, that's what I think.
That was deep. I think I mentioned about analyzing what you did to the other person or to yourself that made you or the other person feel like in a negative way. I think it's very important to really genuinely ask the other person or yourself what made them feel that specific way that I did. And then you can learn from that, to kind of say, like, if I do this, some people may get hurt, so let's not do that. Also depends on how Hemphill said, the determination you're willing to forgive others. Because if you don't feel, if you don't want to forgive 100%, have that mindset, it's very difficult for both you and the other person. So yeah, I would say taking time to analyze is my answer for that.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Taking that time to analyze. And I think additionally, like, getting over a situation, is not enough. You don't actually grow your heart. Instead, you restrict it from growing. So I agree. Definitely taking that time to analyze the situation is important. And is the first step, I would say. For our last question, which I think is a very important question. How do you forgive yourself? I feel like it might be easier to forgive others for their mistakes, but how do you forgive yourself? That self-critic that's in your head.
I feel like, as I said before, my answer to this question is somewhat related to how to forgive. I had to think about that. I was like, what is the question? How to forgive, because personally, I think it's harder to forgive myself more than it is to forgive another person. I think it's also similar to like, self-care. It's easier for me to think about other people and other people's needs rather than put my needs first, because sometimes I think it's kind of selfish if I put myself first, but it's not. Definitely, you should not think that way. Your self-worth and care is definitely important. So that's how I kind of also view forgiveness. In a sense, it's somewhat similar to me, because I can be that critic and nag myself, or you did this and that and all that stuff wrong, or you could have done this and this better. Or like, you can put so much self-doubt on yourself and things, and you can go in a whole big cycle. And I think just coming to terms with that within yourself, like, what are the things I have flaws in, what I want to work in, I think is perfectly fine. And to know where you're at that time and space, I think is good. So then that's where you can kind of work yourself with, okay, what do I need to do now? What steps do I need to do in order to forgive myself, really? Am I at a place where I can forgive myself? Asking like those kind of questions, taking that time to reflect with yourself and be honest with yourself, because I feel like if you're definitely not honest, if you really want to forgive yourself, you're just hiding more burdens within yourself. You're hiding yourself. You're not really trying to forgive yourself. So I think being clear with yourself and making this determination is definitely important. And it's a step-by-step process. It's not like 1, 2, 3 and I'm good, so
I completely agree. Being honest with yourself is important, and as I've said too before, this is a gradual process. I think of how many times I've done something that I wasn't proud of, and how many times I've dwelled on it, or like I've come back and revisited, that thought in my head of, oh, I did this wrong, or I shouldn't have done that. So it is, a gradual process. It's not something that is 1, 2, 3 done, or it happens overnight. And for me, I think back to when I was a little girl. I really didn't have a lot of self-confidence and a lot of self-love. Many factors played into that, like society, what is the standard of beauty? And so I would always criticize myself, my body, how I looked, the color of my skin, and always wish that it was something else, right? And so I've been doing that so many years. I write in my journal like all these negative things about myself, like, oh, I'm this, I'm that, I wish I was this or that. And so it wasn't until I think my sophomore year, out of the blue, like I really don't know what caused me to have this moment to myself, But I was sitting in front of my mirror and I was just staring at myself. And I was thinking back to when I was a little girl doing the exact same thing, just sitting in front of the mirror and staring at myself. And I was in my head, I was like, wait, why did I ever say all those negative things to myself? Like, why did I believe other people's perception of me, of my value, of who I am, of my beauty, right? Why did I allow that? Why did I accept it? And so, and that was like, what, 4 years ago? Yeah. And I was just staring at myself like, why did I do that to myself? And then I went back in my own way. I went back to that little girl and I apologized to her. Like, I'm so sorry for putting you through all that pain and suffering. Like, you're perfectly fine. You did not have to do that to yourself. You did not have to say those things to yourself. You are beautiful. You are valuable. And you don't need others to validate that for you. And so from then on, I started coming up with a plan. Okay, how am I going to take care of myself? Self-care. Physically, how am I going to take care of myself? So then I started investing more in skincare. I didn't have a skincare routine at the time. I didn't even care. But I started investing into that and being more curious about makeup and dressing better, really presenting myself, doing all of that for me. I wasn't doing it necessarily for anyone. And I started working out. I'm still working out from time to time. It's not consistent, but so for me, that was a long time in the making, forgiving myself. It took many, many years to get to that point. Like I said, from the time I was like 8 or 7, that's how long I've been hating myself and causing that pain to myself. So, and also I came to the realization that God doesn't see me the way that I see myself. She doesn't see my flaws, nor does she point them out to me. So why should I hold on to that past? And so that mindset has kept me going, and it's very hard now for me to really get into that depressive mind because I've just been liberated. I liberated myself. That's what forgiveness for the self looks like for me, and that's how I forgive.
I'm gonna be completely honest. I still don't have an answer for this question because I myself is working for this. Working on myself on this. But I just want to say that Handful also said I also kind of thought others are first, then me. But I've been engraved in that thought mostly because of my culture, being Japanese American to be more specific. So I was more concerned of other people, but I didn't give two shenanigans about myself, as Matoba mentioned, because I thought my thoughts didn't really matter to myself, not to other people. So I'm trying my best to I talk to myself, kind of saying positive things about the most simplest things, you can do it, pretty much. Don't think about that. Don't think about that. Kind of have having that Jiminy Cricket on your shoulder, but you're just talking to yourself. So you may look like you're a crazy person, but really you're just trying to take care of yourself. So if you ever, I don't know, if you ever see me do talking to myself, just a reminder to all the viewers that I'm just just self-relieving myself by talking to my Jiminy Cricket that's in my brain. So yeah, that's it for me.
Yeah, and I think, that's totally fine. Like we said, being okay with where you're at, that too is important. And, forgiving yourself is a long process, and forgiving others too. The quote of the week is from Proverbs chapter 17, verse 9. Love prospers when all fault is forgiven, but dwelling on it separates close friends.
Thank you everyone for listening to today's episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at BC Girls. You can also listen to this episode on Spotify, which will be linked down below.
Let's all create a better version of ourselves. Until next time.